Thank you, and welcome everyone to this first session on negotiating the boundary between research and policy and the lessons that access can give us. It's wonderful to see a really full lecture room at this opening session. Many of us, I think, will have experienced in trying to negotiate this boundary between research and policy that there are twin challenges involved. The first we might call the knowledge policy challenge. How can knowledge, evidence and advice be effective in environmental policy contexts? An innocent sounding question with a very complicated answer. I think mostly as well we'll be very aware that the fate of evidence and advice when it enters the policy process depends in large part on the political environment in which it lands. But natural and social scientists and others involved can in fact help shape that environment to some extent. There are many ways in this can be done. In that context, the second challenge comes into play, the interdisciplinarity challenge. And that one is how social scientists and humanities scholars can work together with natural scientists and engineers to inform environmental policies, which I would argue from research and to some extent some experience, then become all the more robust because they've been subject to rigorous interdisciplinary deliberation. It helps make better policies. Part of that second challenge, the interdisciplinarity challenge, is another one, the challenge of the division of labour. And that is the division, again, with which we'll all be familiar from whichever direction, in which there is very often in the environmental field a techno-scientific framing of problems and potential solutions. And the social sciences and humanities, whilst their contribution is recognised and wanted, tend to be treated, as Patrick said a few moments ago, as something that comes in downstream and in delivery mode. And are often, actually, the breadth of those disciplines often a bit narrowly conceived. In this session now, we're going to hear how access task groups have been making, well, I think, fantastic progress in addressing these twin challenges and actually rather skillfully negotiating the boundary with which this session is concerned. So we'll hear from Karen Bickerstaff about net zero, from Michael Winter about nature recovery, from Rory, Walshe and Irene Lorenzoni about adaptation and resilience, and from Hazel, Napier, Helen Roberts and Joe Tomlinson about the policy and practice working group. Our discussants, finally, will be Carrie Heitmeyer, and I would just like to extend congratulations to Carrie for being appointed MBE in the recent honours list for contributions to social science. Our second discussant from Greenpeace Research Laboratories. So we look forward to a great session, I think, because people have both researched and experienced these challenges. We'll hope for a really good discussion as well. Thank you. So we start now with
Okay, thanks, Hazel. I will start off by, I think, introducing the task force, which is a key arm of access, but also talking specifically about the first task force which I chaired, which was on net zero, and think a little bit about these boundaries, how we negotiate the boundaries between research and policy based on that experience. So very quickly, because I'm aware we've got 10 minutes each, just to give you a bit of background on what we were seeking to do with the task force methodology. It was about building an agile, sort of responsive mode of social science, engaging particularly with policy communities in areas, sort of environmental remits where we felt there was a need for social science perspectives. And the idea of the task forces was to bring together quite rapidly an interdisciplinary group of social scientists, so an expert panel to respond to these critical questions and challenges. And this was bringing together social science expertise from across academia and policy and practice. So we've, over the course of Access, we've had 3 task forces, and this is a great opportunity for all of those task force chairs to reflect on that experience. So I'm going to start off by reflecting on the first task force, which was focused on net zero. Okay, so to give some background in terms of how the task force was composed and when it ran. So it ran between 2023 and 2024, sort of extended a little bit over that window. And what we did with Task Force 1 was to bring together a set of 12 social science experts working on areas related, broadly speaking, to net zero. So I chaired it. And one of the key things that we were keen to do with that task force was bring together diverse social science expertise. So we didn't want to focus on very narrow kinds of social science expertise, which is sometimes, as Susan said, the case, but also crucially bring in social science expertise from policy and practice, so it wasn't just an academic membership on the task force. So 12 members, approximately a year that the task force ran for. And one of the things that we were keen to do in terms of how we set about these kind of experiments with task forces was to try and frame it in a way that would speak to a really diverse set of policy audiences. So we tried to pitch these processes as quite broad in terms of the sorts of social science work that we would do. So this just summarises the range, in Task Force 1, the range of activities that we undertook. So just to run through them very quickly, we undertook a review of different social science paradigms of societal change, so different ways in different theoretical positions in terms of what constitutes societal change, so a bit like a literature review. We also undertook a policy analysis, quite detailed analysis of some key policy documents on net zero. One of the key strands to the task force, which we were really keen to do, was look at historical examples of societal transitions and analyse the ingredients of societal change. So we had a case study, so listed on the right, a set of 8 case studies, and then a survey that was led by Alice Mosley, so a large-scale survey of the UK population related to aspects, issues that were coming through and other aspects of our work. And we've also done a little bit of post-task force evaluation work. Okay, so that's what we did as part of the task force. One of the things that we were also really keen to do was to try and find or communicate the findings of this synthesis work in different ways that would reach different audiences, that would be a little bit different. So we spent quite a lot of time thinking about reporting, how we would report this. So we did have a conventional report, but we put quite a lot of work into thinking about how we communicate key messages to policymakers. We published a short piece in the conversation, again trying to distill key recommendations, key implications in terms of how to enable net zero action. One of the ambitions of the task force was to produce an infographic, which at the time felt like quite a straightforward endeavour, but actually for us was really challenging how you communicate quite a complex set of social science methods and analysis in a broad pitch in terms of this is what social science brings. Engaging with social science early on brings to policy around net zero. And we wanted to move beyond just distilling recommendations to make this case for why social science and engaging with social science early on is really critical. So this was the way that we did it, to capture both the recommendations, but also to make this case for how social science helps policy reframe sort of conventional ways of thinking about problems. So highlighting the way social science brings different perspectives, different forms of analysis, and therefore different kinds of recommendations. Okay, so what I want to move on to do is just try and summarise some key reflections from the experience of doing or leading the task force and some of the work that we did. And one of the issues, and this has been debated, I think, amongst the task force and different, in different conversations, it is about how you capture and communicate social science, and the challenges but also the opportunities. And one of the lessons, one of the things that has come up multiple times, is the role of both numbers and narrative in communicating social analysis and what it brings to the table. So what we found was that quite often in many of the conversations that we had with policymakers, numbers mattered. It was really important, or it was really valuable to have large-scale survey data to start conversations. So the first quote that I've got here, this is from a policymaker in one of the devolved administrations, captures this. It found it really beneficial to have the findings from the survey that were framed in relation to the sorts of questions that they were asking. But actually, quite often when we had those conversations, the material that really captured policy stakeholders' imagination, that really communicated social science ideas and social science analysis in a way that brought it to life, was the narrative work, the case study work. So that was seen as enormously powerful in communicating key social science ideas and findings. And just on the right, this is just a summary of how we were representing our case studies. So we had these common ingredients of societal change that we used to analyse our case studies. And that kind of approach and the way it was followed in all the case studies was really powerful and definitely came up in some of the responses to the findings of the task force. Another really important observation is the importance of direct engagement. So I remember a discussion with Pete Bailey, who was on the task force, he said quite clearly that the report isn't the whole thing. And at the time I was a bit like, but the reporting is what we're seeking to do with the task force. But actually, so much more of the work of the task force was about this kind of agile working that was about direct engagement. It was about having different conversations with different groups, different organisations, and being flexible in terms of how we presented the findings of the task force and tailored it to the needs of particular groups and particular conversations. So that was a huge learning, certainly for me. And I think one of the key things here was, we were partly lucky, but we were also hugely benefited from the connections we had with other organisations. Patrick's mentioned the British Academy. But this kind of network that we had was critical in terms of enabling that translation and that negotiation of the research policy boundary. I sort of picked up in those two quotes. The first one, again, from a devolved administration policymaker, the importance of having conversations, having that kind of direct connection, that a report in isolation isn't enough. And again, from Des, that sense that bringing that flexibility, that agility with conversations is really critical in terms of enabling social science to engage at an earlier stage and to sort of transform, to some extent, the way in which social science is interpreted by policymakers. Okay, really quickly, because I know I'm running out of time, just some final learnings and tensions in terms of the work that we did. I think this idea of agility, which is where we started with the task force around the policy boundaries, is really, really quite challenging. So the rhythm of policy and the rhythm of academia, it's quite difficult for that to mesh. So quite often policymakers are asking us for very rapid responses, and research doesn't always work like that. But I think this direct engagement that we built about halfway through the task force really enabled us to be more responsive and agile. Co-production was something that we certainly aimed to do with the task forces, but was quite challenging in the context of the timeframes. Policy intermediaries were absolutely central to what we could do. If we hadn't had policy-facing social scientists involved in the task force, we simply wouldn't have been able to do what we did. So that ability to think through the differences between academic reports and academic writing and the needs of policymakers was critical in enabling the task force work. Very quickly, some issues around influence. I think we did. I think the sorts of conversations that task force enable do see influence, but I think it is quite subtle. It's long term. It's cumulative. It's not just access talking to particular organisations. It's other networks, other research projects. It's that kind of cumulative influence. Policy processes are complex and really, really messy. So it's very difficult to establish influence and the efficacy of this social science policy negotiation work. But I think it does have influence, and I think a lot of the qualitative work that we've done subsequently has shown that. And what we have and what will be demonstrated in the next few talks is we've tried to build these learnings into how we've proceeded with Task Force 2 and 3. So thinking about windows of opportunities, mixed membership, and targeting impact opportunities. I'm sure we'll hear about that from Michael, Irene, and Rory. So I will leave it.
Thank you very much. Straight on.
Good afternoon, everyone. I had the great good fortune of getting a report from Task Force 1 just as we started in October 2024. We paced ourselves. It was good fortune. It was slightly intimidating because it was so good. And I thought, crikey, I've got to repeat something as good as that. That's why we paced ourselves. We've given ourselves time. Again, like Karen said, we've involved the policy people, not involved the policy people, we've done it together right the way through. You know, there is no difference between the academics and the policy people in how we work. We've all gone to meetings, we've all done the stuff, we've all contributed, we've all written, and that has been absolutely fantastic. So what we're trying to do is work out on the specific issue of nature recovery, what social science can offer, and that's a challenge. That is quite a challenge. Again, like Karen, we opted for case studies. We actually did the case studies from the very beginning. We had a critical meeting in Bristol in October 24, when I come up with this sort of nice neat thing. We'll do a big literature review first, we'll sort it all out, we'll work out what we mean by environmental social science, we'll work out what we mean by nature recovery, then we'll choose some case studies. And I can see various people around the room who turn that on the head and say, why don't we just do the case study straight away and learn from those? So that's actually what we did. They're not all finished. We've got text for all of them. They're not yet published. They'll be on the website soon. This is a list of them, and they evolved a little bit. They changed a bit. We've looked at the history or the pre-history, because we've gone back before Natural England. Its organisational history, its culture, its institutional memory, that's one. We've mapped environmental social science. I'm not going to attribute, different people have done these, obviously. I'm not going to name names. The work of the Office of Environmental Protection, particularly looking at how they commissioned some work on local nature recovery strategies, and how that commissioning went and how they worked with contractors, because that's an interesting part. A lot of social science that happens within government is commissioned and put outside. Species Reintroduction Task Force, this was a real tour de force. This was a bit of real research. We were told we weren't supposed to do research, we were supposed to reflect. We actually went and interviewed people for this. We interviewed people for the others as well. And really, really brilliant bit of work done by Beth and those guys. Name people. We've got to name Beth. She threw herself into this one. Brilliant stuff. And I think we got a paper there, actually, to be honest, looking at something that was very much a task and finish organisation. How do we deal with species reintroduction? Hey, it is a big social issue, isn't it? They knew that from the outset. It's not just about getting the ecology right for lynx. It's actually what do local people think about lynx? And what's going to happen if we introduce lynx? So really, really good one. Nature Futures Framework, again, something that's happening, how social science gets involved in that. And then we thought we'd have a bit of a deep dive. You mentioned numbers and how policy people like numbers. We thought we'd have a bit of a deep dive into qualitative insights and behavioural measures and try and up that a bit and see what we can learn from that. So those were our case studies. I'm really conscious of time, so I'm not going to read every bit of these slides. You can read them, and I presume they'll be available. So I suppose the most important bullet point there is nature recovery. In spite of the fact there are local nature recovery strategies and there are bits of government that say this is what we do, it's not a single policy area. It's not a single technical intervention. It cuts across different things. So we've sort of been very conscious of that in what we've done as well. These are the kind of questions that this will not be new to you. This is what social scientists do, don't they? We look at people in organisations and institutions. We look, in this case, on how land use decisions are made, what shapes that, what happens. Because let's face it, the majority of nature recovery in this country, at any rate, is going to take place on owned land where people are already doing stuff to make a living. So this is a really important bit. How governance arrangements enable or constrain public and stakeholder participation, trust and legitimacy, I remember reading more value-driven policy, all that stuff, all that wonderful social stuff. It's kind of encapsulated in the social science and nature recovery. So we're trying to sort of weave that in to what we're saying. Now, a cup half full. There's a real danger in this work, I think. We felt that all along. We don't want to end up being seen as critical of lots of bits of government for not using social science enough. We might be, but we don't want to headline that. Let's headline some of the good stuff. So it is a cup half full. There's lots of good stuff going on. We've shown that in the case studies, particularly the species reintroduction stuff, but also the stuff looking at what the expertise is there, mapping that expertise. There are a lot of social scientists in these organisations doing good things. There's a slight danger that they get taken off into other things. There's all sorts of dangers. There's all sorts of issues around really embedding that and making sure that a cup that is half full becomes a cup that is full. But it's not just about nature recovery needing more social science. Capacity clearly matters, but it's more systemic. How social science is positioned, how it's mobilised, how it's translated, how it's used, how it's recognised, how it speaks very fast, and how it's supported across the evidence policy practice system. We've got to move that up the agenda, is what we're after doing. So this is how our report will be structured. I say will be. There's a good, strong working draft that dear Steve has been sharing with us. It's such a shame this assembly wasn't 3 weeks later, because we're within a gnat's breath of finishing a report and getting it out for consultation. We're not quite there yet, so I sort of feel a bit, and I'm very conscious, I'm saying stuff here that some of the members have yet had a chance to comment on. But that's how we're going to structure the report. So purpose, routes of mobilisation, influence, outcomes, effectiveness, enabling conditions, and use in action. So read it when it comes out. It'll be hitting, well, we're hitting something. Preliminary recommendations, huge caveat here, not signed off by the task force. They might glare at me now as if they see this, some of them for the first time. So please don't quote. But we think we're going to, Steve and I do anyway, we think we're going to recommend that we should clarify and broaden the purposes of environmental social science. We should strengthen the routes through which social science enters policy and practice. And my gosh, Susan's written an awful lot about that, and we're kind of really indebted to her insights on some of this. Involving social science earlier, everybody says that, everybody, it's such common sense, but my gosh, it's difficult to do. the technical scientific kind of framing that you referred to. It is there. I've seen it over and over in my career. Framing an issue in a certain way, and it'd be nice to know what people think about this halfway through. Right? So though that's very obvious, it's a hard nut to crack. Recognising less visible forms of influence, building the enabling conditions for a sustained contribution. So that's kind of roughly where I'm looking at a man at a time. One, I feel like a horrible feeling it's going to be one. So I won't spend any time on that. I mean, that's just putting a little bit more around those words. But you'll see that in due course. So just to finish then, our timetable. Well, end of June for the draft working live report. And it will be out there for consultation. We're going to have a couple of months when we're just sharing it with people. If anybody wants to see it, just let us know. But, I mean, we've got our list of people, key people we've already engaged with in the agencies. I see Isabel sitting there. She's on the task force. She's sitting next to Cheryl, also naturally. Isabel will give it to Cheryl, because she's a key person. So just getting it there and getting some feedback. We will have a final report, we will. But the critical thing is going to be the dissemination and getting out. And we're still working on this. We're trying to find the right ways, the right bits of government. That's hard, as Susan indicated, and Karen indicated. That is challenging. And I know from previous experience, it's kind of finding the right person or the right activity at the right time in the right place. It's no good just sending an email to some senior scientist and saying, we'd like to come along and talk about our report, please. It's if that person thinks this report will be helpful to something that is high on their agenda. And we're trying to negotiate that and find our way to get into those spaces. And I guess that will go on beyond the end of January 2027, Patrick. I'm going to be emeritus professor by then. I'm giving up the university shilling at the end of the year. Can't you see the deep mob feeling coming in? God, I will carry on doing this. I really will. I mean, I just cannot. I love gardening, but I'm not going to garden all the time. So I will be there to try and take some of this stuff forward. For as long as it takes, really, because I can't believe this, as you might have noticed.
I'll just very briefly say that you can see with these task forces we are whetting your appetite. We don't have the time to deep dive, but there is loads of resources. If you want to know more about any particular task force, look at our website, look at the materials connected on the online Padlet, and we have 2 rooms in addition to the ESRC DEFRA amazingly special room. We have an exhibition space with materials for people here to look at, posters, etc., materials. And we have a theatre this year for the first time with a rolling set of videos, including our very own David Michael Winsley, who's talking about nature recovery in situ by the Montreval Estuary. Anyway, so go and look at those and find out more. And now over to Task Force 3.
Okay. Hi everyone, great to see you all. So this time it's a double act. Rory and I are both co-chairs of Task Force 3 on adaptation and resilience. Rory is in Go Science. You want to say anything?
So hi everyone, I'm Rory. I'm Senior Social Science Advisor at Go Science.
Great. And I'm Lorenzoni. I'm in the School of Environmental Sciences at UEA. So we both chair the task force. And again, this is part of that learning process that we've acquired through Task Force 1 and Task Force 2. And try to embed the connection right from the start of the kind of policy interface within the task force itself. So we're doing a little act, we're sharing the slides, and we're giving you a little bit of a flavour about this task force. Because this is the youngest task force. It started really in September last year, and it'll be going on for a couple of months still in terms of outputs, in terms of production, but much more into the future as well.
Great. And the task force itself emerged initially from a policy perspective connected to the Social and Behavioural Sciences for Emergencies group. These are our 12 members listed at the bottom, and a photo that's missing a few key members, unfortunately. These are listed in alphabetical order, and we did deliberate parity between government social scientists, 6, and academics, number 6, with a range of different expertises, adaptation, resilience, emergencies, behavioural science, geography and environment. And a key part of our task force was that co-chairing. So from a policy perspective and also from an academic perspective. It was also very closely linked to the Government Chief Scientific Advisor's Year of Adaptation, which was a sort of route in for us in terms of impact. And we benefited hugely from a wide range of reviewers and consultees, many of which are in this room. And there's also some task force members in the room. Sharon, do you want to put your hand up? And Susan's back there as well, give us a wave. Helen's here, Carrie's there. I think that's everyone. Patrick, there we go. And perhaps, oh yes, and Susie at the back, and Anna's online. So we are here in our numbers. And I particularly want to acknowledge Steve and Steve's wisdom and his help bringing those lessons across in different conferences as well. And Victoria, thank you. So other co-science colleagues really worked on this as well. Victoria Hall, great.
Okay, so in terms of the task force, what did we set out to do? Well, we envisaged the task force to be this collaboration between academic and government social scientists. We really wanted to see whether we could open up the opportunities for increasing the evidence from social science and its use in in UK adaptation and resilience policy. So we set ourselves the task of really, hopefully, aiming to really make these elements much more considered and embedded in policy making. We went into becoming really quite specific. We said that we wanted social science evidence, insights, language, and frames and data to be used by policymakers in hopefully informing adaptation and resilience options, both in terms of behaviour and societal responses. We also wanted to be incorporating natural hazards assessment and climate change literature. I think as the task force has gone on there, it has given more attention to climate change, but those other elements are still embedded in there. And in fact, some of our case studies also draw on those. So we decided to make it work by embedding and adopting the 3 access principles. And specifically, we'll comment a little bit on how we found the co-production process within the task force itself. But Rory and I initially met as co-chairs. We set out how we worked in practice. We found some common ground, and we decided how we would like to take the project. So when we met in person for the first meeting, then we had a recent in-person meeting in May. The task force, with the members that we invited to join, decided that we'd like to meet online monthly. We also had a communications and engagement subgroup focused around how to create and produce the outputs, and then how to generate impact for those. And also we had 2 mini workshops with government social scientists that informed our work.
So I'm just going to talk through some of the key insights that we provide in our summary for policymakers. Just to flag, we are hoping our report will be published by the end of July. So likewise, if this conference had been 4 weeks later, we might have been presenting the work now. But it should be due to be published end of July on gov.uk, so it'll be co-branded between Government Office of Science and Access. And the wording, also similarly, is not finalised for our outputs just yet, but these are some of the central messages that are emerging from our work. The first is that adaptation is at its heart a social process. This is not a fixed target to attain. It is a process, and it's a social one, and what good looks like is going to change over time. Adaptation has been dominated by built approaches, by technical fixes, by engineered solutions, but it's not a case of build it and they will come. So our work goes into the social factors behind adoption, but also the social factors that provide broader context that we should be thinking about. And that leads into number 3, that adaptation needs to be tailored to place. We speak about what determines impact in different groups and why certain groups might be more vulnerable than others. Number 4, we make the argument that we need to take a larger system approach to connect different domains, to think beyond silos, that there are valuable join-ups between mitigation, adaptation, nature, health, and more. And finally, number 5, that maladaptation is a real risk on many things. So we have to think about the connected piece altogether. And this visual is one we use that places social science at the centre and says it can contribute to all the different parts of the policy cycle with some questions that policymakers might think.
So our outputs at the moment are envisaged as a technical or a full report, which is constituted into these three parts, if you like. The value of social science insights for adaptation policy and action, then how to incorporate those social science insights into doing policy and action. We also draw upon case studies. You can see 6 outlined here. And we very much focus on the input that social science has had in enabling and fostering adaptation approaches in relation to climate change. And there's also a specific annex with resources, which we felt policymakers were actually asking us about, are there real-life examples of where social science has been adopted and has led to positive outcomes that we can draw upon. We are also producing an executive summary. All of this is in flux still an introduction, but we hope that it will be coming soon.
Great. Okay, so to add some reflections, just get me down the screen because I have to go very quickly through this. We've heard some of these before, that there are cultural differences between academia and policy worlds. You know, it's somewhat a negotiation indeed between what we wanted to say and what we needed to say to land our message with our key audience. Languages are different, terminology is different. Timeframes, particularly, there is a stereotype, I hope I won't offend any academics, to say that academics work in years and policymakers work in weeks. But actually, in this case, that stereotype has been inaccurate. It's been the policy side that has delayed and slowed down this work ever so slightly. Just to say stereotypes not always right. Clearance is complicated and can sometimes clash against the principles of co-production, co-design, because that is an opaque procedure and it's complicated. There's also, as has already been flagged several times, assumptions about where social science fits. If it's about getting buy-in or people to agree with our policies, or if it's wider about context.
Yeah, I know.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Right, and then a few other final reflections in terms of how we took this challenge forward. So yes, it hasn't always been plain sailing, I would say, but we've been supported by a fantastic task force. We've been held to task by the members, and the members have been great in challenging us, but also in inputting ideas and giving us opportunities for thinking differently about elements, and also really questioning how it was that we were portraying elements and how we could make the outputs of the task force really impactful and helpful for policymakers. So I think from our point of view, building trust before even the beginning of the task force, but also cultivating that throughout, being really open about the process and about any setbacks or hiccups that we were facing was absolutely important. I think we've learned a lot from each other. We've been reflective about the process, but reflective about ourselves as well, how we work and how we have also worked together with the task force under the context of government requirements. And also, I think having a wide consultee and reviewer set of people who were very willing to give us comments on the report was really, really helpful. Although we were drawn in different directions, we were also exposed to things that we might not necessarily have thought of. So it's been a negotiation and a compromise, but a really valuable one. And actually, part of the workshops that we held as part of the task force gave us insight into how social science could be incorporated better into policymaking. And you can see these elements here listed 1 to 7. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but actually really interesting. We touch a lot upon those principles of co-production and how it is that you can actually work across disciplines and across different areas and sectors such as academia and policy in terms of trying to instigate opportunities for making policy more integrated with other disciplinary perspectives, including social sciences. We also felt the tension between qualitative and quantitative. So this quote that you can see here, which is misattributed to Einstein, it's actually by the sociologist William Cameron, says that actually the most important things in life often can't be numerically reduced. And so there is value there in the stories and the narratives and how we feel about things. And these are elements that we are trying to address in the task force as well. So we would both say, and I think the task force would support us also in thinking that actually if it's uncomfortable, it's probably challenging and it's probably really worth doing. So a bit of antagonism, a bit of difficulty is really worthwhile pursuing. We think task forces are great, we definitely recommend them. But of course, we have to live with the negotiation process. And hopefully keep going, we still haven't finished. Thank you.
Thank you both, and to my Michael before you, and now we'll move on to hear about the policy and practice work.
Great to see you all. My name is Jo Hamilton. I'm an Access Research Impact Fellow, and I'm going to be presenting today with Hazel Napier from the British Geological Survey and Helen Roberts from the Met Office. We're going to be sharing some reflections on boundary spanning reflecting on the Policy and Practice Working Group, and this is also ongoing evaluation that we've been doing along with Patrick Twinewright and Sarah Hartley from Access. So just a brief overview, we're applying a conceptual lens of boundary spanning to really evaluate and track some of the impacts of the Policy and Practice Working Group, and we're drawing on Bednarek et al.'s definition of work to enable exchange between the production and use of knowledge to support evidence-informed decision-making in a specific context, and that context being environmental policy making. So we'll just address a couple of the challenges to embed our mainstream ESS in policy and some of the solutions, and then go through some of the benefits and the value of boundary spanning. So for those who are not familiar with the Policy and Practice Working Group, so back in 2022, instead of one-to-one meetings between Access and different policy actors, it was really established to facilitate communication and spanning boundaries and co-learning across these different sectors of central government, devolved governments, funders, Economic and Social Research Council, universities and research centres, professional bodies and agencies and regulators. There's quarterly in-person and online meetings, and the membership has really increased from around 15 organisations in 2022 to around over 24 at present. And the positionalities of members differ. So some members are part of large social science teams, and some are more minority social scientists and environmental social scientists in predominantly STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths dominated organisations. And that's some of the perspectives that we're really going to be drawing on today. So just a little bit of background, there's been some ongoing evaluation work looking at both the challenges of incorporating ESS, which we've been hearing in terms of specific task force perspectives, but also we're looking at the value of an ongoing group that can really bring environmental social scientists together across these different sectors. So there's been 2 evaluation workshops, and we've been doing some thematic analysis on those, and some of you in the room contributed to those. Thank you very much. And this has also been developed with perspectives from PPWG members in STEM-dominant arm's-length bodies, so Helen and Hazel here. So some of those challenges, as we've heard already, about knowledge hierarchies that really favour STEM disciplines, and also that ESS knowledge is marginalised. So in reflection and in addressing those challenges, we're really going to be looking at the value of boundary spanning in PPWG according to these 3 areas really. So about greater awareness of ESS knowledge, policy systems, about increasing confidence in agency of the different members within the organisations, and around developing interdisciplinary practices. So I'm going to hand over to colleagues Helen and Hazel to discuss those in more detail.
Thanks, Jo. So hi everyone. It's fair to say that the BGS, British Geological Survey, is very much a kind of natural science STEM organisation. So slightly blowing my mind that I'm kind of standing here now in front of lots of social scientists. We do have pockets of social science. So my colleague Anna Hicks over there, volcanologist and social scientist. So there are pockets, but it's very much STEM focused. So what this group has really done is helped to kind of understand how other organisations embrace social science, and to discover that Forest Research, Natural England, etc. have social science teams. I mean, who knew? So we definitely don't have that. And of course, meeting Helen and her journey with social science as well has been really empowering. So learning about how social science is integrated into different organisations was one really key learning point. Having functions or teams or pockets of social scientists, but also what you're doing with social science too. So what type of work is going on, whether it's more policy related or research focused. So that was kind of 2 key learnings for the BGS. I'm going to hand over to Helen.
Thanks, Hazel. So one of the key learnings, I think, for me was about that knowledge share across multiple perspectives, multiple disciplines and sectors. And as Hazel said, we are actually both part of other projects as well. We've just come from a meeting of another subgroup of Access, and that speaks to that top left point, which is that PPWG has been fantastic in and of itself, but it's also been part of that wider Access network, and we've all been supporting and learning from each other along the way. So that sort of brings us on to that sharing knowledge and know-how across sectors. And as we've already heard today, and we've already heard at all of the Access assemblies prior to now, there are these common challenges, and it's really nice, it's really encouraging to hear that you're not the only one feeling and experiencing these challenges. That in and of itself is really, really beneficial. So just being that support network for each other has been great. But also then, of course, learning from those experiences. And other organisations are at different points in their journey of integrating and mainstreaming the social sciences. So that's really useful as well to learn from others who may be a little bit further along that journey.
And also, I mean, today and yesterday, we've been talking very much about that. And one of the other key take-homes has been, hang on a minute, we've got stuff we can share too. So it's kind of giving credibility to our experiences. But also, that's really empowering. So actually, we've got something to say. So, that in itself has been quite a good kind of learning. 1 minute. It goes quick, doesn't it? So just very quickly, talking about integrating social sciences into a technically focused organisation, great learning, lots of good contacts and information to share.
Yeah, and those interdisciplinary practices within STEM organisations, championing the value, raising awareness, and highlighting the value and importance of the social sciences in those organisations where STEM often still does have that hierarchy in terms of knowledge and evaluation. So this was just a quick one about actually, the other thing I wanted to mention, which I might have missed on a previous slide, was about the challenges of this type of work. The main one, I think, being that, oh goodness, it's yet another meeting in my calendar, is another thing I need to commit to if I'm going to commit to it. That might be because you need to justify it to your management. It might be, well, definitely will be, that you have to justify it to yourself as well. And reaping the benefits often takes time. And so you have to weigh up those pros and cons. And, we've highlighted the benefits and it really has been worth it. But you don't necessarily know that at the start.
Yeah, so just in, thanks Helen, so just in summary, just a couple of other things. So having more confident conversations in your organisation, learning how to influence your senior leaders, and having better access to expertise and experience. People in the room here, it's been fantastic. So thanks, Patrick, for inviting us to Access.
Thanks. So PPWG has contributed to boundary spanning in terms of next steps and future directions. So and it's a fixed term. So it's that ongoing challenge of really long-term investment in really changing the field and the environments to enable boundary spanning practices, both across organisations and within organisations, spanning those multiple boundaries. We really hope this contributes to sharing more case studies of interdisciplinarity within organisations and across sectors. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much and for being very efficient in staying to time. We're now going to move seamlessly on to our discussants, starting.
You stay here, should I? I'll stay here. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the presentations. It's so really, it's incredibly inspiring to hear across, starting from Task Force 1, but then sort of cutting across to where we are now with the other task forces, but also the policy and practice working group, which has now been going on for several years and seems to just be going, continuing to build momentum. It's really great to have the opportunity to really sort of step back and sort of take the chance to really reflect on everything that's all of the work, but also the sort of networks and alliances and learning that's taken place over the last several years through Access. And I guess I just wanted to, so there's so many parallels across the different presentations. It's really striking, despite the fact that we're working in different agencies, different disciplines. Some of us are working in, as I think Joe said, or Helen, bigger social science teams. Some of us are just a couple of us in an organization that's dominated by STEM or by policy, and we often feel like sort of the lone person in the room. And in terms of the sort of broader policy, social science interface, there are the sort of predictable things that we know are difficult to do in terms of negotiating between academic culture, policy culture, timelines, hierarchies of evidence that we often have to negotiate with the quant and the qual and making the case. Oh my God, I only have 1 minute? Oh, okay. I guess I wanted to, the main thing that I wanted to say, two main things that I'm going to squeeze in. One is, I think the point that Rory made, or maybe Renee, around leaning into the discomfort. I think there's a huge amount of, it often feels not quite right. It feels, the compromises feel uncomfortable, difficult, uncomfortable, but there's a huge amount of, I think that as a result of that discomfort, that all of the sort of work and impact is part of that process. And then just equally, as a provocation, how do we continue to continue the networks, the alliances, the work beyond the reports themselves? And I think that's a massive question that would be great to sort of take on as a group over the next couple of days.
Thank you very much, Carrie. And let's move on to Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and good afternoon, colleagues. It's delighted to receive the invitation from Patrick for me to join this fantastic group of people here. I'm Melissa. I'm an ecotoxicologist by training, so I might be one of the few natural scientists here. I don't know many people here, so please feel free to come to me and to say hi so that I don't feel lonely. I wear two hats. I'm affiliated with the Biosciences department in the uni, but my main job is working for Greenpeace Research Laboratories, which is the science unit of Greenpeace International. I was similarly surprised to know Greenpeace has a science unit when I was applying for that job, so I think today is a good chance we have a little bit understanding of what we're doing in the science unit. So in short, we work at the science policy interface, and I think it's similar to the research science boundary we are discussing here across the triple planetary crisis, the climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Up here in the green box, you can see the examples of a few UN processes or conventions or the agencies we engage with at different levels. For example, you might see the ISPCWP is abbreviation, but it's a sibling for the IPCC and IBAS for pollution. We were the first proponent. We tabled the first thought starter. We encouraged and enabled the UK and Switzerland to be the champions to leading this. And we helped them to nurturing the negotiation all the way through its establishment last year. Just one of the examples. And on this interface, we have three elements of work, which is on why, what, and how. Why policy makers should be concerned with some of the environment issues. We are doing that through shaping the science foundations, including through the laboratory work, field work, modeling work, and horizon scanning. And the what should the policymakers do, which including us tabling proposals for effective treaty design, including core obligations, including financing mechanisms, and including synergies between different treaties. And the third element is how, which is the most tricky bit, is the constant flow of powers in the room, on the corridors, and between different sessions. And I think one of the distinctions between our work and many fantastic work here is we are heavily internationally focused, so just bringing a different perspective. And through this journey, I have been able to meet with quite a few fantastic people, including academic and government scientists. When we sit down and reflecting on this journey, there's a strong shared sentiment that at the beginning of working at the science policy interface, it could be feeling clueless and terrifying because our academic training didn't prepare us for this at all. So together, we tabled 6 collective suggestions based on our first-hand experience working at the science policy interface. Not going to details here, but the one I would like to highlight today is building interdisciplinary network, rapport, and champion science as a community. I think that's also echoing what Suzanne has mentioned earlier as the twin challenges here. Why this is important? Well, obviously it delivers. I'm taking the plastic treaty negotiation as an example here. Back in 2017, at the early days of the discussion, many people think it's just a pipe dream and will take easily decades to get a mandate to start the negotiation. So back then, there's only a handful of us, I think no more than 20 from the civil society organizations and individual scientists. We were active in this area. And because we were small, so we need to work closely with each other. And that's where the first community started to shape. And soon, a few of us, including me, have been invited by UN Environment Programme to sit on their scientific advisory committee to develop the flagship report, which has been the foundation for the 2022 UN resolution on the mandate to start the negotiation of the treaty. And since then, we have seen the surge of the broader global movement, including the establishment of the Scientists' Coalition for an Effective Plastic Treaty, which was initiated by some of us who was in the first kind of network and the community. And together we have been publishing targeted papers on core obligations and financing mechanisms, including top journals like Science. We have been building policy briefs. We have been organizing events. We have been talking directly with diplomats, negotiators, and ministers, and we are answering the consultations. So those are some of the work we have been doing together as a scientist community. So community definitely delivers. And community also catalyzes innovation. Recently, a few of us from the Scientists' Coalition have published a paper establishing an integrated, cross-domain and sector-agnostic sustainability hierarchy framework to enable constant decision-making across multi-dimensional sustainability challenges like the plastic pollution. And we have posted there, not going to details of the content of this paper, but I want to highlight here, it wouldn't be possible if without interdisciplinary collaboration. I had the idea since the lockdown, but I was a natural scientist. I don't know how to build a framework until the moment I met with colleagues from the social science and political science background, and they finally helped me, and we worked together to put this into a peer-reviewed paper. And I think that's why the interdisciplinary collaboration toolkits that Access and IES are collaborative developing is a huge asset for all of us, and I really look forward to the presentation later today. And this is my final slide. The community also important in terms of helping you, supporting you, and empowering you. So working at the science policy interface isn't easy. The verbal intimidation, the ungrounded accusation, sending to a vice chancellor, challenging your academic credibility, have been some of the examples my co-authors have been experiencing in their daily life. It feels terrifying. You can feel lonely about that. You cannot tackle that or handle that alone. So that's where the community comes to help. They understand what you're going through. Even your family might not understand what's wrong with you. And they help you, providing you the guidance and the support, both professional and emotional and mental ones, to help you get through this difficult time. and also help you to reflect if there's still a journey, you still have the courage to carry on. If so, how? So I would say that's why I feel building the interdisciplinary network and community and rapport with each other is so critical for us who decided to work at the research policy boundary. We cannot work alone at this boundary to protect our environment. It's not easy. So let's work in collaboration, work in solidarity, look after each other and champion science as a community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for bringing in another set of interesting perspectives. I'm not going to attempt to sum up, but just offer a few, yes, that would be truly impossible. I just want to, first of all, thank all of our presenters and our discussants for some great points. Really interesting. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Let me leave you with some of the impressions that you've all left me with. So first, there's huge positivity here, and it's really good to hear that. It doesn't always characterise gatherings of social science. But it's really good, as we are aware of the challenges, and Melissa has produced some more that we really need to be aware of. But it is good to hear the positive side of this and to hear that it can work and to see how much Access has been contributing to this and kind of laying out the territory and proving that it can be done. Secondly, it leaves me with a sense of the power of case studies and exemplars. Rather, or possibly as well as, but in some circumstances, rather than just abstract ideas about interdisciplinarity and science policy boundaries and so on, which we've written about and talked about, just the sheer power of showing what can be done. A well-chosen case study goes a very long way. Thirdly, I'm struck by the deep advantages of just getting on and doing things and trying things and not agonising too much before doing that. And finally, as our task group members have demonstrated and our discussants have emphasised, you can move mountains almost with the right attitudes and conditions, amongst which I would include resources, time, and a collaborative spirit. You don't go into things as two sides or different factions, but collaborative spirit. Mutual trust among all those involved, different disciplines, policymakers, practitioners, others. A good dose of humility, I think, is very helpful, and perhaps most important of all, a very well-developed sense of humour.